and they have a little bit of English in common, but of course the couple turn to one another and speak Russian, and the guys turn to each other and speak Punjabi, and the whole film is precisely about how a situation where these people had come together and were trusting each other devolves precisely because they don't understand one another's words, and so they begin to try to read their body language and their tone of voice, and they misread it, and it becomes about the way in which language, how important language is for understanding at a deeper level. So I've always enjoyed working in languages that I don't understand or don't understand fully, and I think it's partly because, you know, when you travel and you're outside of your own element, obviously you're paying closer attention to the world and you're more observant, and as a filmmaker, the filmmaking simply becomes an excuse for me to go get on a plane and go somewhere and have something that I can say that I'm doing, and so that I can go and interview people and learn about the world. And so I frequently gravitate towards places outside of my culture and end up working in languages that are not English. But I find that once I'm actually working, I do improvisations I was doing improvisations in Albanian, and I could, because I would set up the context of the improvisation, and because I had studied Albanian, I knew more or less what they were saying, but after we would finish an improvisation, I would then, because the two main kids spoke English and Italian, I would ask them to recount what it was that they had said. I discovered very quickly that it was an interesting tool for the improvisation to have them revisit immediately afterwards what they had said and see what were the salient or memorable moments of the improvisation for them. So in that way, language became very important to the process.
Question?
Yeah, this is for the whole panel. For Herzog, one of my favorite films is Battle Lieutenant, Port of Calls, New Orleans. Hilarious film, wonderful film. And then if you look at your body of work, you've got some very dramatic films. This last film, Into the Abyss, being very sad and dramatic. As a filmmaker, for all of you guys, do you reference your body of work when you're making a new project? Do you try to start from scratch? Do you reflect upon what you've done before? Do you try to improve on it? And if so, is it an intentional effort, or is it sort of a subconscious thing that you just do in becoming better at your craft?
It's for me, what?
For the whole panel, I think all of you guys would fall within the auteur theory. You guys are pretty...
Okay, I'll start it. Yeah, of course, it makes a difference for whom you are working and what your audience is going to be. We always spoke here about doing the film, but you have to see at the same time what your audience is going to be and what kind of screen you are going to hit. And there's an interesting thing going on with Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which was shot in 3D. However, I never had planned to do it in 3D until the moment I set my foot in the cave. That was 2 months or 3 months before I started shooting. It became evident this was going to be imperative to shoot it in 3D. Finances, however, had come or had been established through History Channel, much of the finances. So all of a sudden you have to make a film for television and they won't show it in 3D. It is growing now, but and at the same time, what do you do with the request of television stations to have every 9 minutes or so a commercial break of 2 or 3 minutes commercial break? What do you do? How do you handle music? You cannot have a long growing piece of music which has to be cut in the middle in order to give space for the commercials. And what is going to happen later with DVDs? I think there's 3-dimensional DVDs out now, so that's fine. But what do you do with History Channel, who is going to show it? So the choices are strange sometimes and partially dictated by who finances it and what is going to happen with the film and its audience.
But I'm going to refocus. I think what you were really asking is the extent to which each of these directors, in the terms of the auteur theory, is able to, in a personal way, reference his previous work in the work he does. So may I ask, Werner, even with Cave of Forgotten Dreams, I mean, you do include, towards the end, animals? And
yes, there's good stuff about radioactive, mutant, albino crocodiles.
That's the one.
I won't miss them, and audiences love it, so no, it doesn't change my fascinations. I'm sorry I acoustically misunderstood you. Now I just plow on as I did for a long time. Always curious, always open to new horizons.
How do you reference your own work, or how do you avoid it? I mean, how do you forget that you've done something before? I mean, one thing is clear, you only have one first movie, and after that, you cannot make your first movie anymore.
Yeah, innocence is gone.
Innocence is hard to get. And the hero answer for this question is Dashiell Hammett, who I once made a movie about. And this man was very successful, wrote in Hollywood, and from one day to another stopped writing. Didn't write a single line for 20 years, was in prison and God knows what. And at the end of his life, he was asked by a journalist, what happened? Why did you stop writing when it was going well for you? And he said, I was sitting at my typewriter and I realized I was doing it because I knew how to do it and I was good at it. And that was the end of my desire to write. Because I knew I only did it because I knew how to do it. And I think it's great for filmmakers to know that they're not just doing it because they know how to do it. I think that's the worst enemy of every craft and of everybody, I wouldn't say artist, but of anybody who is doing something relevant. Don't do it because you know how to do it.
Yeah, I try not to bore myself, so I try to find something for me challenging, but I realize there's something coherent in some movies, but I haven't done so many movies. But for the next one, I think I'm going to change radically, and and I try to make some very different things, some documentaries. I try to produce some things, and I try to. I made two comedies that people liked a lot in France, and I decided to try something else, and I try not to get bored. That's the
But I think if somebody wanted to make a case, even on the basis of just a few films, that you are an auteur or that there's a recognizable thread, your films are filled with a nostalgic affection for previous movies, and your knowledge of the previous movies is very embedded, I think.
Yes, the three you're reference to, but there's some other things I did that's not in that vein, but that's why the next one will be totally different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Josh, and that's going to have to be our final one.
Well, I'm facing this difficulty right now because after Maria Full of Grace, which was in Spanish, I've now made a film in Albanian, and the first question people often ask is, so are you ever going to make a film in English? And on the one hand, I have many ideas for films outside of the United States, and I would be very happy to keep traveling. On the other hand, I feel that it's this, there's this desire by the outside to say, I've only made 2 films, but 2 dots make a line, and suddenly I'm supposed to keep walking on this line. And if there's really, there are a few careers in film that I really admire and I'm envious of, and Werner has one of them, and that is because Werner keeps making things that are completely surprising. And while there is no question that a Werner Herzog film is always a Werner Herzog film, they're always different. And that, to me, is the best one can hope for, so that you always have a voice that's yours, but you're always, in terms of your approach or your subject matter, doing something different.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. I'm just going to conclude by saying that this past year, we hired Paul Schrader to teach a class at Columbia, and he's certainly been here in Telluride many times, and he wanted to teach it on the films that have changed filmmaking, using technology as the point of departure, so that one week would be about the introduction of the panning camera, and another week would be about sound or color. And he said at the end of the semester, something that he had mentioned at the beginning, each technical innovation in the history of cinema has been a toy, something to play with. And when filmmakers started using it as a tool in order to tell the story, that's when the language of cinema evolved and developed. It's nice to know that it is still growing at this time, thanks to people like the ones on this panel. Thank you for joining.